It's now July of 2022, and we're here today at Starberry Farms to interview these two people who have seen 8 decades of collies and have been involved in breeding and judging and all other areas of club work. So both of you were New Yorkers by birth and eventually moved and got interested in collies. So Sally, let's start with you.
When we moved to Connecticut, we had a male collie, and it was the real day of Lassie, and I was young and impressionable, and went and bought a female to breed to our collie, and it didn't happen. So Ed Pickard had just moved to Connecticut, and the town next to ours, so we went there, and for some reason he allowed us to breed our substandard female and helped me choose the best ones in the litter and bred her and another generation and then lost them. So he ended up giving me a female who is a double granddaughter of Star Mist, and that was how Starberry started.
And was that Cerise?
That was Sterling Starberry.
Oh, Sterling
She
Starberry.
was out of, she was a double Star Mist and out of Snowberry. That was how the name came about. And then we bred her daughter, Cerise, back to Sterling. And that
You bred her back to
to Sterling Stylemaster,
Stylemaster.
who was Ed's pick puppy from the Mangles' first litter.
Okay.
And
Wasn't he a litter brother to one of their
he was a
dogs?
full brother of Major Merrymaker.
Okay. Who's
Having
Tom
seen the
Ford.
first litter, Jimmy decided to repeat the breeding and keep a male who was injured, so he was never shown. That was Gaylord's Major Merrymaker, the sire of Flash, who was
Tomfoolery.
Tomfoolery.
And Bob, how about you? You moved up to Connecticut from...
My family moved up to Connecticut from Long Island in the late 40s. I was going to continue school in Connecticut, and in 1951 I had polio, and so that took me out of school for most of a year, and had to repeat the 3rd grade, 4th grade, whatever. So many things blend in together now, but the good things will always stand out. And while Sally was doing what she was doing, about 6 years after she started, I was going to high school up in Falls Village, and it was very convenient to stop and see a dentist in Kent, in the town where I left, so where I lived. And the fellow that was practicing dentistry in Kent happened to be Jim Mangles. And he and his wife Trudy had been looking for somebody to help take care of the of dogs. They had a little girl named Sarah that was very young at the time, and with a field full of collies, they I guess we're looking for help, and that was a lucky day for me.
And they were, I guess, newlyweds at the time, you know. Because,
fairly young.
Yeah. Trudy had started on Long Island with Brandwin, and then, of course, Jim had the Gaylord dogs up in Kent.
Mm-hmm. And they in the winter or fall and winter of 1957 is when I really started getting interested in having one of these fine dogs. As a matter of fact, Trudy even offered to give me a dog, and she says, "Well, you certainly need it." I think Bo Peep had just died about this point. And that was a pet quality collie that was our family dog.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, there was a tricolor male that was really pretty, and Trudy tried in the worst way to get me to take him home, but he was a monorchid, and I got through to her what I wanted to do, and she had a picked puppy from Sue Hansen, and she had Sue coming that night with the whole litter of puppies, and so I saw all of them, and when Trudy picked Folly, who was later named, there was a bit of harassment by my family because everybody wanted to call her Bob's Folly.
And that was Brandwin Follow Me.
Yep. And the name itself, I should have looked it up. It comes from scripture. So.
Okay, so there you're sitting with Mistress Mine, and you're starting off with Folly. So let's go back a little bit. You said Mistress Mine was 1954, and she was by Style Master?
Out of Cerise.
Out of Cerise,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She finished in 54.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm going by
Right.
the years that they
Yeah.
finished.
Right.
And so, had you bred her? What did she produce for you?
Well, everything I had for generations came down from her. We tried to breed her to Tocalan Golden Ruler, and he was not siring at the time. So we bred her to her brother and got a bitch that we called Call Me Madam, and bred her at Tocalan to Tocalan's Another Storm.
And that was
And
Solace?
that was Solstice, came from that litter. It was a try breeding. And Solstice, or Jenny, was bred to Golden Ruler after Mrs. Browning closed her kennel. She called up, I was away at school in college, and she called up my mother and said, the AKC wants me to get rid of these dogs, so could you come and get some? And I got home, and my mother said, I have something to show you. We'd given up our dairy herd and had the whole barn with big box stalls for calving. And we went down to the barn, and in one was Champion Tocalan's Golden Ruler, and in another stall was Tocalan's Storm Cloud's Reflection, and in the third was Tocalan's...
Royal Flush? Royal Flush?
I'm sorry.
Royal Flush?
Royal Flush, thank you. And I think there was a blue dog, a blue bitch too, or maybe she came later. Mrs. Browning called up and said, I have this bitch in season and I have nobody to breed her to. Please come get her, breed her to one of those dogs, which we did. And that was the start of our combining Sterling and Tocalan.
And that was a cross that became...
It was very
well-used and
successful.
very successful.
It was the basis of Gaylord Brandwin and ours and a number of other.
Okay. How involved was your mom with all this? And my other question, when you moved to Connecticut, was that to Southbury?
Yes, we lived in Southbury.
And you had a big working farm, or?
No, a small farm. We had a resident farm manager and did the rest ourselves. I drove the tractor and did all that stuff in the summer.
Okay, and you had your interest in horses and dogs at the same time.
Yeah, I was basically started off being interested in horses.
Okay. The other thing, during part of that time, you had a bitch called Starberry Great Expectations, and you bred her to Style Master, and that produced Starberry Little Dory.
Yeah, I think she was our second champion.
And she went to the Lamoureux?
I sold her to a couple that were fairly new in Collies. They're friends of Doc Greathouse's, and he was kind of their mentor. And she was bred to Champion Breeder's Gay Cavalier, who also lived in Louisville, and produced a really great litter. I think 3 champions finished all as young dogs. And Bronzelock Star Parade was the bitch that came east and won at Westminster, was winners at Westminster, and then went back to Chicago and won Best of Winners at the CC of A as well.
Right.
With Champion Brandon, needless to say, as winner's dog.
Mm-hmm. Let's just take a look at, let's say 1961. That's when you finished Solstice, and the other one's finished, and you had another bitch called Starberry Royal Ballet.
Yes,
and
she was a
by
puppy.
the Tercallan dog you had at the house.
By Royal Flush, yes.
The 61, who were the big dogs throughout the country? What did the collie picture look like back then?
It was beginning to be all parader, except in the Northeast, where Brandwin was still in. I think that was the era of Jory's Mr. G.
Even before that, though, remember the 58 CC of A and the snowstorm, and the 58 National
at Hartford
was at Hartford at an all breed.
Right, and that was the year Don Minute went Best in Show.
Yes.
Yep.
So it was a pretty fruitful time for the collies, with different families evolving, and Brandwin and Parader really kind of making their mark, I would assume.
Yes. Well, Darn Minute was the cross with his sire being Gaylord's Mr. Scalawag, and out of Parader bitch.
Okay. Okay. So, Bob, where were you in the early 60s?
In the early, well, as I stated earlier, I had Folly, and she had her first litter. I guess it was kind of like the first dog that can breed her is going to have her and have her litter. She wasn't spoiled. I would never spoil a dog.
Oh yeah, okay. We know that
okay,
story.
as long as we're straight. But anyways, she tore after a couple of different males that Trudy had, and Trudy made this statement, well, don't overlook Dooley. I said, Dooley?
And that
she
was
said,
Brandwin Hickory Smoke.
That was Brandwin Hickory Smoke. And to the best of my knowledge, he was the only dog that was ever from a Needles Flyer cross.
Okay, that would have been
he was by Needles out of a Flyer daughter.
Okay.
And I don't know why the cross was never done again, but I just don't know that.
And he didn't get used a whole lot, but you know, like I was telling Sally, I remember the Valdon dogs all went back to that one.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you get from that litter of Folly bred to him?
The best thing in the litter, I know now, was a tricolor bitch. That was.
Is that cheerleader?
What's that?
Cheerleader?
Yes. And
Bobby
the
Jones'
reason she was called that is because before her eyes were open, she climbed out of the whelping box, which was 4 12-inch boards nailed together,
Gotcha.
and
The standard.
the standard. Anyway, there was a sable male in the litter that I thought I would show, and by the time he was old enough to show, so was Folly, and Trudy said, "You really ought to take her to Westminster." And I said, "Well, we tried that last year," and she had been at Westminster in a senior puppy class that we had there under Mrs. Gray. And this following year, when she was in much better coat to go to a dog show, Trudy showed her for me.
And that was Mrs. Tharp, was it?
And that was Mrs. Tharp.
And she was best of winners, I believe. I know she was winner's bitch.
She was winner's bitch anyway. And but in those days, it was a Westminster had in the 80s or 90s for entries,
Right.
and they would drop and not be 5-point for winners, but it would be 4,
Mm-hmm.
and it really meant something. And then Mrs. Long, a person that I always highly respected, had a bitch that was out at the same time, and was it Red Ink?
That sounds
Possibly.
right.
Or
Eris.
what?
Maybe Eris.
No,
She came
I
before
I
Red
seem to
Ink.
think it was Red
Okay,
Ink,
Whatever.
but
By Red Man. Eris was by
yeah.
Asai.
She when I told she got reserved to Folly anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and Mrs. Long was always a person that did a lot of looking and not a lot of talking.
Mm-hmm.
And the following year, when she was judging at Westminster, when I told Trudy I was going to show the sable dog, which was her
Pins and
son.
Needles?
Yeah, Pins and Needles. And she said, "Yeah, right. You do that. You're going to go to New York, and you're going to show your dog under Mrs. Long, who had the bitch that she was hoping to win with last year."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. You thinking about this? So it was. Well, there were a few crosswords spoken, but I got my way anyway, and showed them myself.
And the result?
And the results were best of winners at Westminster with the first homebred litter.
Right. And again, that was Folly bred to
Hickory Smoke.
Hickory Smoke.
Oh, when he was a puppy, Steve Field did the
CC Bay.
New England.
New England,
New England
specialty, which was up in Springfield. And it was an all-breed show, and all, but it was a good fat major, and he was, I believe, 9 months old. So he was just over, and he had a lovely coat, nice texture, and all. And after judging, my mother and I were sitting on the bench, and we saw, look who's coming, here comes, and Steve Field, and he was coming down through the benches
areas.
to look at the dogs that he had just put up and just say hello to everybody. He was a very pleasant man. He said, there you are. I think he called me son, which was a popular thing for an older man to call a kid. There you are, son. What are you going to do with that dog? And I said, I'm going to keep him and show him. Well, good. I hope you do that. You're going to keep him yourself. Yep. Very good.
Steve was a very encouraging person, wasn't he?
And yep, he. I'll never know whether, if I said I think I'm going to sell him, whether he would have dug in his pocket for his checkbook right then and there. I've got a feeling, because that was about the time when they were beginning to have some Prater Brandwin crosses, and so.
Now, I always felt that somebody like Steve Field was always thinking ahead. You know, he'd have all these nice bitches sired by his stud dogs, but he always wanted to figure he was going to make a cross here or there. Lots of times he would lease stud dogs, like Redman, you know, and he'd start doing the crosses early. In later years, he bred the Conspirator with the Country Squire crosses, you know, things like that. And I think that was a pretty solid way of doing breedings back in those days, which added to his success. But back to pins and needles, did he figure down in future generations for you?
Oh, no, it was his sister.
The sister was cheerleader?
It was his sister. He died unexpectedly. I think he was only 3 or 4 years old.
Sad.
He was not an old dog. I don't know why. And, you know, he died overnight. Found him dead in his stall in the morning. And that was before anybody knew anything about bloat or...
Right.
So...
Well, go back to his sister then. You took his sister Cheerleader and you bred her to tomfoolery?
Yes. And that was... What?
Her grandfather.
Yeah. Who was her grandfather.
Okay.
And the first thing Trudy said about that was, "Eek! They were all going to be black." And my answer, being a wise kid, but wouldn't they be pretty? Wouldn't they be nice? She said, "Yeah, but they were all going to be black." And back in the late 50s, early 60s,
Collies were supposed to
Collies
be
were golden. They were mahogany, but it was, and at that time, too, if you breed a litter, you're looking for that one individual.
Right.
People weren't taking and placing all the puppies around and showing them all and all. You just took the best individual, and that's what you would carry on. And I was fortunate enough to have to carry on with a dog and a bitch.
And that would have been
that would have been
Shenanigans
and Trudy B.
And how did she get her name?
Yes. My mother was always thinking. She loved to make up names. It was a time... Oh, that was when I was not working for Jim and Trudy. I was working for Ed Pickard, part-time and all. And but here was this pretty puppy, and also I decided to take her to her first dog the first dog show up to the Collie Club of New Hampshire, and Trudy had never seen her, and she was judging, and
Don't.
today I would say I shouldn't have done that and put her on the spot, but she liked her, and plenty of other people did too, and she finished easily. Her brother Shane did not finish so easily.
And that was Shane was Shenanigans.
Yeah. He was a good sized dog, had good length. He was a wonderful mover, but he really didn't like to use his ears. Once, twice, hey, what do you want 3 for, you know? And he won under probably 5 or 6 different all-rounders. One of them was the first major he ever got, and he finished under somebody that I really liked. She was a friend of Mrs. Christie's, and
Ruth Williams?
and Ruth Williams, both. The big white dogs.
Oh, Mrs. Crane.
Oh, Mrs. Crane.
Mrs. Crane.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mrs. Crane. And judges did such things in those days. Once you were a judge, and she was an all-rounder, you wouldn't get scolded for.
No, you had control of the ring.
You had control of the ring.
And they didn't have field rules.
And she put me over on the other side, in the center of the ring, and to me, I was embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
And she turned to the rest of the winners class and said, "What are you people waiting for? Here it is." And when I think now that somebody like Mrs. Crane, when she said something like that, it
carried a lot of weight.
It means much more to me today than it did 50 years ago.
Yeah. You know, sometimes I think some of those older judges were almost prophetic. They were like prophets. They could foresee future and, you know, just kind of see where things are going. What year were you guys married?
57. 67.
67, I was going to say.
No, 57 started with my first
Right.
brood bitch, and then.
But it was during this time of breeding that eventually, when the Starberry and Bobby genes connected, it would be the use of Shenanigans and, you know, those dogs breeding with some of Sally's bitches and back and forth that, you know, things took a different turn.
There were several things that really set us back. One was a, you know, not just physically, but emotionally. There's a thing in horses called a blue hen, and
what was the blue hen?
the blue hen was an individual that could produce the good qualities that they had.
Consistent.
Consistently, yes. Steve Field had a blue hen.
So the early 60s, you wound up acquiring a bitch from someone else, and that would have been Champion Starberry Kittredge Kilt. She was by Westboro Bold Yankee out of Kittredge Temptress. So how did that evolve?
Mary and I had become friends
Mary Kittredge?
Mary Kittredge. And I became friends when she was living east. And she had Temptress with her, and she liked Starberry Edwinell, so she was heading around the world with her husband on a yacht that they had built for them in Maine. And she left her with me, and unfortunately she missed when we did the breeding. And she had promised her to the Baumans of Rock Dorbert, so she left us and went there. And she eventually had the litter by West Barab Old Yankee. But Mary had told the Rock Dorberts that I was to get one of the puppies. So I went down, and there was a little bitch that just sparkled. And I said that was the one I want. Well, Mary liked this bitch, and so on and so forth. And I said, well, this is the one I want to take home. And when I got home, I told Mary about it, and she said, oh, that one was definitely the puppy. And she went through all kinds of stages, and I didn't know as much as I thought I did, so I would complain to Mary on a practically weekly basis that she has no coat, or her back skull has not come up yet, or this, that, or the other thing. And Mary said, just wait, be patient. And I did wait, and took her to the Philadelphia show with Jack LaFleur judging. And she was a holy terror. She wouldn't do anything right. So I took her home and said, I'm going to take you to a match show tomorrow and beat you up if you don't behave. And she was a star and went best in show over, best in match, over 400 and something dogs. And from that day, she never put a foot wrong in the ring. But it was the year of Glendale Spun Gold and Brandwin Bayberry Miss were also flyer puppies. And Kildy had to wait until they finished. And she got her 4th and 5th majors and finished.
Okay, and she would play an integral part in your breeding program in generations to come.
Absolutely.
At that time, you also had a litter brother to Mistress Mine, Starberry Edwin L., who you said was the reserve king of the East.
Yes,
or
he
would it
did.
finish?
He liked dog shows no more than Shenanigans did.
Okay.
And he won. He almost won under respected collie judges, and got some points under all-rounders because he too was a very good mover. But he was quite a dominant sire, and was used by other breeders as well as us to good effect.
One of the breedings you did to him was with a co-owned bitch with Ken Goldfarb, Champion Nuego's Goodnight Irene. And that litter produced 2 more champions bred by you in Champion Starberry Sugarloaf, and then the CC of A winner's dog in 1964, Champion KG Star.
Yes, Ken had a also bred Irene to Royal Rock Gambling Man, and had won at the Garden with that
KG Man About Town.
With that puppy. And Irene had a great deal of difficulty whelping, I think 12 puppies.
Wow.
And my mother hand-raised them on goat's milk. And so when he won at the CC of A, Ken took his sterling plate and had it engraved to my mother as the breeder. I forget how he put it.
Huh.
Ken's daughter needed a very expensive flute, and so Chris was stole to Japan, unfortunately. We never got to use him.
I couldn't remember whatever happened to him.
Yeah.
Well, so then you're moving down a year later, and you had a bitch called Starberry Lala Rook. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
And she was?
She was by Edwin L. And out of a result of the breeding of, we finally got to Tocallan Golden Ruler.
Okay.
Who was one of my heart dogs. The Tocallan dogs were not known for good temperaments. They were very sensitive, and we found them to be very sweet, loving dogs, but other people would buy them, and they had not been socialized to the extent that collies should be. But Ruler used to lie on our front lawn and just watch the traffic go by, with no fence between him and the road. This was when we lived at the farm in Southbury. And more people would just stop or would drive by just to see him.
With his big white collar and his big neck.
Yeah, and his beautiful flame-colored coat.
Mm-hmm.
But I know a lot of people who felt that he was the picture of a collie that could well represent the standard. But we did finally get the puppy, the litter, from Mistress Mine's granddaughter, and
and Lala came down from that.
She was a ruler daughter bred to Edwinell.
Okay. And you bred her to, or he wasn't a champion, Glen Knowles Knightswood Sky.
Yes,
And
because Edith Spun Gold had been from an Edwinell daughter.
Okay.
And
Edwinell bred to Sheldon.
So this was yes, and got 2 dogs. I got a sable merle, which at that time was not kosher,
fondly.
and we named her Sky Blue Pink, but we eventually didn't use her. But we got 2 dogs, Saladin and Caliph.
Okay.
And Caliph finished. Saladin inherited Edwinell's lack of enthusiasm for dog shows.
Uh-huh.
And he also got a lot of reserves.
Okay. And that was all coming into when Shenanigans was also fitting into different programs at, that period of time in the mid-60s. But back to Kittredge Kilt, she was bred to Stony Kirk Sureka.
Yes.
For what reason?
Because we've loved the Honig's champion Stony Kirk Reflection, who was a grandson or great-grandson of Starberry Masterpiece, Mistress Mine's, and all similar breeding. His sire was a style master son, and he was not available, so we used his grandson, Sureko, who also went back on his dam side. And you can see the 2 of them on the same page in the champion book for that year. Anyway, produced a dog we kept and a dog we intended to keep. But John called me up, and he'd gotten another dog from out of Priscilla Alden, who bred Reflection. And he promised Priscilla that I would sell him a puppy. So I let Priscilla have the picked male in the litter.
And that was champion Stony Kirk Starberry.
Yes.
Okay. And the one you kept? You said
we placed him with a family who wanted him as a pet, and we finished him.
Okay. Do you remember his name?
Starberry Yankee Sabra.
Oh, okay, that was the other. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. 1968, you finished champion Starberry Kit Whistle, and she was the result of breeding champion Starberry Kittredge Kilt to Starberry Saladin. She played a pretty important role in generations that would follow through there. One of the breedings you did was to Shenanigans, Bobby Jean Shenanigans. And from that came champion Starberry String of Pearls. Tell me about that one.
I sold a half interest to her. I sold a half interest in her to a friend in Middlebury, Connecticut, and we showed her. Yeah, we showed her for them, and I don't think they ever got puppies out of her. But her brother was, although he never finished, was a continuing generation bred to a bitch that I bought from, oh, I didn't buy her. Laverne Walker sent her to me to breed to him. And
That was Starlight?
and Lori Starlight.
Okay, and
great-
she was bred to Hullabaloo.
Hullabaloo, and produced litter back in the days of the virus.
Parvo.
No.
No, it was Corona.
No, it wasn't.
No?
It. Sorry, Ron. No, that when they get cold, when they get chilled,
Oh,
if they don't stay warm enough, they. Oh dear. The baby puppies die. Anyway, we lost the whole litter except for one boy puppy.
And that would have been champion Starberry St. Patrick,
It would.
who was winner's dog at the National in '71, I believe.
His first show, we had entered him under Steve Field up in Western New York at the specialty, and there was a blizzard, and we started out to go to the show, and we were getting later and later, and the snow was getting worse and worse. We couldn't find out if they delayed it or not, so we gave up and turned around and came home, and so we never got to show him to Steve.
and the last couple of words that Sally just said, I think is very important to a question way on down over there that you're going to ask is how do you see dog shows now and showing dogs now as opposed to in years past. It's another one of these things that I can hear it. I can hear it, and should we go, the CC of A is just a couple of weeks away. Should we put this entry into Western New York? Stephen's a baby, and all this, and we all know what Western New York weather is like in February. But the real question was, how is Steve going to like him?
All right.
That's why we were going. How is Steve going to like him? So even though he won the National a couple of weeks later,
right,
we were cheated out of that.
Yeah.
that few moments to see how does Steve like him, because that was important.
I think the whole notion of seeking approval from the people you really respect is something that's been lost over the years, because of, if they win, they win. If they finish, they finish. But I think, older breeders, for me at least, it was you wanted those wins under certain people that really meant something. And, I even remember last year when my friend David Fitzpatrick won under Pat Trotter. I know how much that affected him and her, because, somebody that you just hold in high regard and their opinion would mean everything.
Mm. Oh, sorry to interrupt you.
All right. If we fast forward a little bit, we get up into the 1980s. And I still remember the National in Springfield because it was the last one we had outdoors. It was the show where they discovered a young blue bitch named Star's Blue Jeans. But there was a really beautiful winner's bitch there that year, and her name was Starberry Belle of Georgia. Her dam was Starberry Rachel, and I don't know what the pedigree was behind that one.
It was a combination of our lines, Shane and...
but wasn't it she by Dark Demon? By
No,
Gimli?
no. Rachel?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. She was a combination of our lines and a tricolor bitch that was, I'm trying to get the generations straight in my mind, so I'll go on. And we had fallen in love with Hanover's I Am Legend and his son Flaming Legend, and bred her to Flaming Legend. and were very disappointed that we didn't think she was going to have puppies. So I put her back out in the kennel with her mother, Rachel. I put Rachel back out with
Belle.
her, and came home, and the two of them were taking care of a singleton puppy.
Huh.
And that was Belle of Georgia.
And Belle of Georgia, the name,
After a peach.
after a peach. After a peach.
Yeah. We had a number of them at that time.
Okay. Since then, you've finished assorted dogs and bitches, including Starberry Dublin Hill Scout or Dublin Hill Starberry Sentry, some other ones up into your current dogs, which include
We have a granddaughter of a bitch that we acquired because of Sandy Tuttle's generosity, and Leela Wachtell's. Leela sent her champion bit of blue to breed to Shenanigans, and when she had a daughter that she brought to the National, she wanted to send her home with us, and I said, wait a minute, the only dog we've got is her father, only tri-dog we have. And Sandy was there with Buddie, and so Sandy took her home and bred her to him, and we got a blue bitch that we bred to Shenanigans, and then a daughter to Dark Demon, and that's the 13-year-old that's over there is a granddaughter of that breeding.
and most recently you finished a sable dog.
Well, he was a dog that was had his picture on Facebook, and I really liked him, and his sire went back to a dog that we had used before, previously, and that blue bitch also goes back to him, Kevin. Helen Corneo's breeding.
Okay, Mylan's.
Yeah. So anyway, this dog was a 5-month-old puppy, raw, not finished at all. But a well-known judge told us at the time that he needed to grow up when we showed him under him.
So the sable dog comes down through some of your old stuff on the dam side, you were saying?
Not our stuff, but dogs we had bred to.
Okay.
And we brought him home, and after COVID, he finished very easily with 2 5-point specialty wins under judges who have been around for a while,
Okay.
who have seen the same dogs we've seen.
And now you've got a new one growing up
Yes.
that is reminiscent of some of the ones back in the ones that we've talked about today. And this is one that you got from Lori Jeff Greer.
Yes, Jeff and Jenny Satyavello bred her, and decided they had this sable bitch left over who was a number of people's pick of the litter, but she decided to gift her to us, and we're really enjoying her.
Good. Do you have plans for breeding her, maybe?
I would like to breed her to our recently finished sable dog.
And
yes.
his name is?
Starberry,
Gale Force.
the Gale Force. He was supposed to be Starberry the Special Force, but I changed his name and didn't cross it out thoroughly enough, so they didn't do it properly. He was bred by Laura LaBounty, her partner.
So, after all these 8 decades and everything else, you know, when you look back over all these dogs that came into your life or these people that came into your life, what are the big takeaways for you? We've
tried to keep the same style of dog. Maybe people will call it old-fashioned. We told a well-known breeder, very successful breeder, that her dog was an old-fashioned dog, and she was horrified. So I think we should have used the word classic instead. But
I always say to people too, this dog is old-fashioned, but I mean that in a positive way.
well, that was very positive when we were talking about him. And
Have you seen any great changes in the way the dogs are shown, bred?
well, there's nothing in the standard that says cute, and I think the word is used too much to describe collies. People don't mean anything derogatory about it. They think it's a positive, but nowhere in the standard does it say that they shouldn't be pretty. And I think that your average show collie today is prettier and has been prettied up a lot more than we used to do. But
We used to go to a dog show with a little bucket that you could carry water in it, and maybe
Or
some
brush.
dishwashing soap. Sometimes there was a stage when I got my first atomizer, a St. Aubre's atomizer, instead of a sponge. And you could put beer in it and to give the coat a little more body and all. It's amazing to tell people that you were
It's the way it used to be.
going to a dog show like to Westminster and won it with a little bucket and a sponge and some soap suds to get the dog ready to go in the ring.
So Bob and Sally, after these 8 decades, or if we put it together, 160 years between the two of you, you've seen so many great dogs come and go. You've worked on breeding programs, combining different families and coming out with success stories. If you were to give a newer breeder coming along, maybe not brand new, a good piece of advice to help carry the breed forward, not necessarily to carry them forward, what would be that piece of advice? And you don't have to agree on it. You can each have your own idea.
Why do you want to do this?
Meaning?
There has to be a lot of motivation to do, not what we did, but many people did much more than we did. But there has to be a reason for it, and you have to know what that reason is.
And are there wrong answers to that? If somebody said, I want to breed 50 champions?
good luck.
Well, and with I don't know that it's, with
Oh
a
no,
lower
today
point,
it probably could be done.
Right.
Sure.
So it's a matter of having loftier goals. And
You-
sometimes
you need
writing
a
it down.
you need a passion
Absolutely.
to be successful as we would define success.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to breed the perfect dog, but if you get closer each generation, or if you can look back and say, this one was a real good one, and now I have another one that good again. It's not
Breeding
going to
for the
happen
best.
every generation,
Right,
every breeding.
right.
And that's something you need to realize. We all make mistakes.
And how many lessons do you think you've learned in dogs from a bad experience?
Probably more than from the good ones.
Sometimes a breeding fails or something, and you realize later, it's probably good it failed. I wouldn't have wanted to keep something there. Sally, what about you? What would you offer up?
Well, one thing, having been so involved with the club over many years, I started out helping Ralph Morrison with the yearbook, and when he quit in the middle of a year, I was asked to take it over and did it for quite a few years. And then that led to being secretary after Art Alexander and so on. And we've also been involved in local clubs. It's a valuable experience, or at least it can be, to work with other breeders in that way, to get to know them as friends, not just competitors. and it's something that doesn't seem to be working these days. There are too many local clubs falling by the wayside that aren't living up to their original goals, and the fancy as a whole would be better off with groups, and we have the framework to do it. So
Do you think Facebook
seriously,
has affected that concept?
I'm sorry.
Do you think Facebook has affected that concept?
No, people just are too busy doing too many things and going to too many dog shows that Facebook is fine to keep you in touch with people, but it's not the same as seeing people face to face. We belong to several very active, effective all-breed clubs, as well as local collie clubs. And today, all-breed seems to be a bad word to collie people. All-breed dog shows don't count, and all-breed clubs, nobody thinks of joining them and helping them.
Well, I think too,
promoting
not
them.
even just Facebook, but the internet and modern technology. We used to go to the club meetings because that was the only place you could learn.
True.
And you would sit and hear a speaker, but you were all like-minded people, so when the meeting was over, the conversation continued, the learning continued, the sharing of experience continued. And now, if you have any questions, it's like, well, ask Dr. Google.
True.
I think that has an effect on it too. Best memories after all these years in dogs, when you look back on it, how do you sum it up?
Well, some of the best memories were the times we meet up with old friends at the Nationals, and you'd carry on a conversation as though you'd just been talking yesterday.
You started last year.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you, Bob?
John Kavanaugh. Who was it?
Steve. Bill.
Steve.
Phil.
Steve Haslett.
Oh, Haslett.
We used to tease about buying Steve Haslett a new typewriter ribbon because he tried to get one or two more lines on his card.
And he turned the card sideways.
And no, you would have to hold the paper and pull the ribbon back and type over that used ribbon.
Yep.
And but it's been a long time since a piece of mail came to our mailbox and it didn't go in the house unopened.
Right.
It got opened at the mailbox.
It used to be that way with the Collie magazines too.
Yeah.
When you when the dog news used to come and see, that was when we were in a
Right.
contract with a all-breed magazine.
Well, thank you guys. I think we're running out of tape here. I appreciate this, and I've enjoyed this little trip down memory lane.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for doing it, John.